Do you hear that? That's right. Silence. I just finished feeding the cows out in the middle of the paddock, so I thought I'll take the time when it's beautiful weather and it's just nice and quiet, no screaming toddlers, to talk about a topic that I've been thinking about since last week. With the closure of Game Informer, it really does highlight the turmoil and the downfall that traditional video games media is in. And it's something that I see as a problem down the track. And not because we don't have other options, we do. We have YouTube, we have podcasters, we have people doing their own content. I guess similar to me, but bigger and better and whatever. But it is a problem we will see down the track when it comes to the information we get for our hobby. But before we get into that stuff, I just want to talk about my history with being a fan and consuming traditional video games media. And when I was a kid, man, back in the early 2000s, I was all about video game magazines. Here in Australia, we had Game Informer, Hyper, and a bunch of kids magazines as well, like K-Zone, and personally my favourite was a magazine called Total Gamer. And it was a video game magazine aimed towards children, and it had just so much personality put into it, and it's how I made a lot of decisions about the games that I bought, and even having my first memories of being disappointed in a review. There was a game I was interested in getting. It was called Digimon Battle Spirit, and it was a 2D fighting game. It was pretty basic. You hit the enemy, you get balls out of them, and whoever got the most balls at the end of the match won. And it was pretty cool. It was a little bit like Super Smash Brothers, I guess, story mode, how you just go through, do matches, and get to the boss at the end, and you beat it. And the idea is to go through it multiple times, unlock different characters, etc., etc. And I was a massive Digimon fan at the time, so when I saw that game got a 5 or a 6 or, whatever, something pretty low, I remember being like, oh, come on, man. I ended up buying it and loving it because I'm a kid. I got no expectations. Just give me whatever you've got. Same with, I remember Pokemon Emerald as well. I remember that getting a 6 in Total Gamer. And I'm like, man, 6? This game's awesome. And, through the, lens of an adult who looks at the game and says, look, they haven't made many changes to this. It's got the Battle Frontier, all of this. But when you're a kid and these games are like a second world to you, maybe your second home in some ways, how much time you put into it, the characters, the story, everything feels like it's just a step away, just a little portal into your Game Boy Advance. I remember thinking oh, come on, man, that sucks. Why would you give it a score that low? That's disgusting. Maybe not that vitriol. Maybe I didn't care that much. But video game magazines, I hold a lot of nostalgia for them. And as a kid as well, I struggled with reading, writing, all of that. I was always in the special classes to help you improve your reading and all of that. And, I think that's something that really contributes to my lack of self-confidence. And there's video game magazines that really gave me the push to really want to, read more, write more throughout my whole school career, even in year 12 at the end of high school. Our English teacher, I always appreciate this. She always gave us a lot of room to do what we wanted to do, whether it was to write about what we cared about, do certain papers on certain things. I always chose video games to do those writings on. And if it wasn't for that, if we had to just do a book report on a book I didn't care about or whatever, I think I would have found it a lot harder. But through my love of video game magazines, reading and writing about them, I was able to really sort of bring myself up to what I would consider where I need to be to actually be able to read and write in modern society. But that was just how special, video games and video game magazines were to me, and I always appreciate the writing that went into them. And going into the online era, it was, say, 2010, when I was discovering live streams and E3 and reading sort of just, previews of video games that were coming out of that convention and, sticking on IGN, just seeing the latest and greatest coming out. That's when I was really into reading video game websites as well. Stuff like Aussie Nintendo here in Australia, that was a great fan-run community, and I loved everything they did, the forums over there. and all of that. But I guess that's not really so much traditional media in itself. But IGN was a big one for me. I think a lot of people who are into podcasting, they will recognize the name Podcast Beyond. But I got into Podcast Beyond in the podcast because I was on IGN consuming all of the written articles, the reviews, all of that. And eventually it sort of led to podcasting and video content when they transitioned to video and podcast content. And I fell in love with the personalities that were on that website. And in the early 2010s, I was basically consuming all IGN podcasts. I was listening to Beyond, Nintendo Voice Chat, Podcast Unlocked, Game Scoop, and whatever offshoots they had as well. And that's all I was listening to. So I was all about traditional video games media. They did a great job. They gave me the information. They gave me the insight. And, I hold a lot of respect to that era of traditional video games media. But eventually, I think what sort of happened is a lot of people moved to just solo creators. And for me, I think the biggest shift happened when Greg Miller and Colin Moriarty left IGN to form Kinda Funny. And that was an independent outlet where they did their podcasts and videos, but it wasn't so much like journalism. They weren't going out and doing big write-ups and breaking stories and doing that type of thing. It was much more critiques for video games and entertainment. And that's where a lot of our eyeballs have sort of shifted to over the last few years, where we are very much looking for video game reviews, previews, entertainment, and personalities. And that's all great. But when it comes to actually breaking news, finding out reports from within certain companies, stuff the companies don't want you to know because it will hurt their image and all that, we're losing that, which is a problem. And I think that's where traditional video games media has sort of fallen down. Because how can IGN, Game Informer, all of these sort of outlets with a building, staff to pay, just all of these sort of payments they've got to put out, whereas someone like me in the middle of a paddock can also do the same thing. Not on the same scale, not saying I can do that either. I'm just starting out. I'm just starting to do this type of thing, so I'm not putting myself up there. But there's a lot of great creators that I watch that are able to put out awesome reviews, previews, critiques, breaking down the news and all of that within their own bedroom with no costs apart from the camera and maybe a subscription to a podcast streaming service or something like that. But it's just nowhere near the amounts that these other outlets have to put out. So when it comes to the closure of Game Informer, you can sort of see why. Game Informer is by far the longest standing video game magazine that's still running, and that's largely because of its involvement with GameStop. How they have a physical store where they can sell it and it brings people in and it's a part of their membership and all of that. But it seems like that wasn't working out, which really sucks because I'm just a massive fan of Game Informer, but I don't really have a thing in the race either because I haven't bought Game Informer for a while either. And Game Informer, the Australian sort of vertical of it, shut down a few years ago here in Australia as well. So we don't really have that connection anymore, which sucks. Also in Australia, we had Kotaku Australia shut down as well, which Kotaku Australia, for those that don't know, it isn't really Kotaku, say that's in the US. It is the brand basically bought the rights to be able to use the Kotaku brand. So it's different people and all of that. But when you compare, and I mean this with all due respect to the wonderful staff and people that worked for Kotaku Australia, but when it comes to what Kotaku Australia offers compared to anybody else and what the costs and what Kotaku Australia actually had to make it viable for the parent company, you can understand why they shut it down, as much as it sucks for the people that work there, but also here in Australia. If you want to talk about video games for a living, you love video games and you want a career in video games, where's the trajectory? Where can you go? If I want to become a video game reviewer, where can I go? You know, there's no outlets. IGN Australia is just I don't know, it's just like a couple of people there. I don't even know if they have a building anymore. I got no idea. They've got a couple of people there, which I've respected over the years, and I really enjoy their podcast. Anybody that remembers the IGN Australia podcast, that was a doozy. That was fantastic. But where I think Kotaku Australia really sort of struggled with is what do they offer that's different from people on YouTube. They had write-ups, they had reviews, previews, some editorial pieces, some opinion pieces, but they didn't really offer like traditional journalism where they are breaking things that a normal person wouldn't be talking about necessarily. It was all just like something that if I had more time, I could do just in the middle of a paddock with a microphone and a pen and paper and a laptop. Like, you need to offer more than that when it comes to running a big website, and obviously it wasn't working, because what I need to I guess make it sustainable is not much. This is just a hobby for me. So when it comes to professionals making money and making a place in this industry, and they're competing with people that are just doing it for fun in their spare time, that's what makes it tricky. Because even on the website front, like here in Australia, we've got like player2.net, Explosion Network, Well Played. We've got a bunch of them that do fantastic work. And a lot of that is just because they love talking about video games, because they love creating content, because they love writing. They don't do it for all the ads, for all of the money coming in. They don't make it a sustainable business as much as they would like it to be, and as much as they probably can make it in the future if they play it smart and it's only like a few of them running the website and all of that. But when it comes to like a full staff, it doesn't make any sense to do this anymore, which is sad, because this is truly how I feel about the downfall of traditional video games media, is that yes, you can get your news from Drew sitting in the middle of a paddock, or you can get the news from someone sitting at their computer desk talking into their camera. But where do you think me and that guy gets their news from? It's from opening their phone and seeing what IGN, what gamesindustry.biz, what GameSpot, what, I don't know, all of these websites put forward. And they are the ones doing the hard work to break the stories, but nobody else will. So what it's going to turn into without all of these, I guess, professional journalists, professional critiquers, just professional writers in the industry, is it's going to turn into just regurgitation of press releases. And all of these video game companies, you can see the shift that they're doing to control the message. All started off with Nintendo doing their Nintendo Directs. How, nothing can go wrong on stage. They show the trailers, they say, please be excited. They show you, and then on Twitter and social media, then they post it from there, and it just circulates. People know the release date, they pre-order, and then all of these content creators get sent press release just saying this is the game, comes out now. But there'll be no interviews, no behind the scenes, nothing that isn't controlled directly by the company itself. And that's what worries me, is that we're going to just turn into a sterile, just controlled message consumerist world without, I guess, video game journalists doing the hard work to actually break down the stories, to get behind the enemy lines in some ways, to actually tell the stories you want to know about. And while I think that stuff places like IGN don't really do that, it is places like gamesindustry.biz, Jason Schreier, who works for Bloomberg, which is not a video games outlet, but maybe that's the future of what I'm hoping for, is that other outlets, other news organizations take video games a little bit more seriously, and those traditional journalists do the hard work that you're actually going to get some news stories out of. Stuff like the Washington Post with Gene Park. A lot of these places, they do have a video games guy. Just one. Usually. They put one person in charge of this whole industry, this whole creative place. You cover that. All of it. Everything from EA Sports to Nintendo to PlayStation, Xbox, PC, what's going on with the latest RTX card? You cover everything. Free to play on mobile and PC, iPad. I think these places got to take it a little bit more seriously than that. But it's a tricky thing. It's a sad state of affairs. I think the writing's on the wall. Video games media is going to go. And the outlets that will stay, the big ones like IGN, potentially GameSpot. I've never been a fan of GameSpot personally. They've never had anything interesting. I don't want to poo-poo them too much. I know there's great people over there, but, it's just... I don't know why I have to put that in there. I feel bad now. But the big players, they're going to turn into just like wiki farms, just the SEO sort of amalgamation of everything that's going on. So it's tricky, dude. I wish it was different, but maybe it's time for content creators to sort of step up and maybe try and be journalists themselves. I don't know. That doesn't really work either, because none of us have gone to journalism school. We don't have ethics. We don't have anything. We don't have anything. We don't have any integrity. We got nothing. I'm just a friggin' farmer sitting in the middle of the paddock talking to himself in front of his cows. I've got to go to school if I've got to try and take up that mantle. I don't know. It's a tricky thing, man. It sucks. It really does suck. But, rest in peace to Game Informer, Kotaku Australia, many others. And I hope you're able to make it work, because us gamers, we want these outlets to stick around. I know that there's a lot of people who seem to poo-poo traditional games media to say, look, let's just go to YouTube and watch bloody Mr. Matty Plays talk about games. And that's great. I love Mr. Matty Plays. But it's important to have traditional journalists in this space as well. So let's finish off by just letting me know what you guys think about, I guess, the downfall of traditional video games media. Do you see it sort of bouncing back? And of course, what is your favourite video games media outlet? Are you a big fan of IGN? Were you a big fan of Game Informer? Let me know in the comments. But until then, guys, enjoy your day and happy gaming.